In today's video, we'll discuss about indirect function in Excel. And using the indirect function, we'll prepare this fully dynamic attendance summary report. Here in this report, I have a drop down which have a list of header names, which I want to see the report. If I want to see report by task name, then I can just select the task name from the drop down, then we will have the task name wise summary report. If I want to see report by cost center, then I can select the cost center from the drop down, then we'll have the cost center wise summary report. And also if I want to see this report for any specific attendance date, that also I can see. I can just change the date here, then we will have the summary report by cost center wise for this attendance date. There is no helper column, no complex formulas, no complex logic, and there is no if condition to switch between these headers. So stay with me on this video and we'll learn how we can use indirect function to create this fully dynamic attendance summary report. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss any of the videos. So before we start, let's understand how indirect function works in Excel. Indirect function return the reference from the specified text string, meaning we will pass the reference as a text value and the indirect function will convert that text reference into the actual reference. If I want to refer to the A2 cell, then how we will do? We'll use the equal to sign and then we can refer to this A2 cell, right? And this will be a reference. So we are referring to A2 cell here. So when we are using equal to sign and we are referring to cell, then it will act as a cell reference. Right? If I just enter the A2 in a cell, then it will be act as a text value, right? We know this is a cell reference, but we have entered this as a text value in a cell. If I want to convert this into a cell reference, all I have to do is I have to add the equal to sign in the starting. And once we add the equal to sign, then it will be act as a cell reference, right? This is the same behavior if we have a names in the name manager also. So let's give it a name to this range of cells. So from A6 to A11, let's give it a new name by clicking on name box. The name I am using as a my cell range. If I enter the my cell range in the cell, then it will looks like a text value, right? If I want to use this name as a cell reference, what I have to do is I have to add the equal to sign in the starting. And once we add the equal to sign, then that name will be act as a cell reference. If that name exists in the Excel, then only it will be act as a cell reference. If I enter any name which is not exist in the system, like if I enter the A here in the last, no, this not acting as a cell reference, right? Because we don't have any cell reference with this name in this file. If I remove this A, then it will be act as a cell reference. So whenever we want to refer to any cell, we have to add the equal to sign. If you want to do same thing dynamically, right, then you have to use the indirect function, right? So we have entered the cell reference as A2 and the cell reference as my cell range as a text value in a cell. To convert this and to use this as a cell reference, we can use the indirect function here, right? So let's enter the indirect function equal to indirect bracket open. So it has two parameters. The first one is the reference text. So here you have to enter the reference as a text value. You can enter the reference in double quotes as A2, or you can select the cell where you have entered the reference as a text value. So in this case D3. So in D3 cell we have entered the value which is a cell reference as a text value, right? Now close the bracket and press enter. So what's happening here? So indirect function referring to A2 cell indirectly. We have passed the A2 cell reference as a text, and using the indirect function we are converting into the actual reference so that it will refer to the A2 cell, right? Same thing if we have a names in the name manager, for that also we can use indirect function. So here I enter the define name as a text value. Now let's enter the indirect function, and in the reference text you can enter the name in a double quote like my cell range. Like this also you can enter, or you can sell the cell reference where you have entered the reference as a text value. So in this case D6, right? So in D6 cell we have entered the cell reference as a text value, right? Now close the bracket and press enter. You can see this referring to this A6 to A11 cells. This is very basic function, but it's very powerful. This formula helps in creating dynamic reports in Excel. You can apply indirect function on the cell reference, name managers, and also on the official tables. Now we know what is the use of indirect function in Excel. Now let's see the dataset what we have here. In the raw data tab, we have the attendance data, which has attendance date, the employee details, and the attendance status for each of these employee for the respective attendance date. And in the mapping details, we have the mapping details which we have to use to prepare the dynamic report. Right? In the dataset, we have the team name, we have the employee name, we have the task, cost center, and shift. And same way in the mapping details, we have the unique predefined list for each of this mapping column. Now let's see the report format. Click on summary report. Now this is the report we have to build using the indirect function. So we want this report to be built in this format. Here I don't want to use any pivot table, and I don't want to use any Power Query also. So let's create the summary report format, and then next we'll start working on the base work. Use the keyboard shortcut Shift plus F11 to add new sheet. Let me zoom this up. Now let's give it a name to this sheet like final summary report. And we need the report in this format, right? So let's copy this headers to our summary report format. Now we have this headers. So what we need? So here we need the drop down which will have a list of headers, right? So here we have to get the drop down list. And here in the attendance date column, we have to enter the attendance date for which we need the attendance status, right? So here we will have the date. And go back to our summary report format. So here we have to get the header unique predefined header list, right? So whatever header will select from the drop down, that respective header unique list should reflect here. And this details, this unique list should be come from mapping details, not from the raw data, right? So we have to get this predefined unique list from the mapping details for the selected headers. So here we have the header name. So let's enter the header name here. So whatever header I will select from this drop down, the same header name I want here, right? Like in our summary report, when I am selecting the header as a task name, that same name is reflecting here, right? So let's do the same here also. So equal to, select this B2 cell. So in B2 cell we will have a drop down where we will select the header name, right? Now press enter, we will have that name. So if I select the header name as team, then we will have a team here also, right? Now next, in the next column we have to get the total count, and next we have to get this unique attendance status list, right? We have to get this attendance status list. In the mapping details, go to the mapping details tab. Here we have a predefined attendance list. So let's convert this data into the official table. Select the data, use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+T, enable this option my table as header, and click OK. Now we have converted this attendance status list into the official table. So the reason for converting into official table is, in future if I get any new status, then we can add the new status in the mapping details, then automatically it will reflect in the summary report. Right? So official table helps a lot in making dynamic. So and the attendance status is reflecting in the row wise, right? So we have this unique list in a row wise, but in the summary report we have to get the attendance list in the column wise. So what we will do here, we'll use the transpose function to transpose data from rows to column. So let's enter the transpose function here, equal to transpose, bracket open, go to the mapping details and select this attendance status list. Right, so we have selected this, close the bracket and press enter. You can see we have that unique attendance status list in a column wise. In future, if I add any new attendance status, right, then automatically it will reflect in our report format. Right, so let's delete this for now. Now let's format this header. Let's copy this formatting, select and apply the same formatting here also, just to keep the consistency. Now we have the report format ready. The next we have to start working on the base work. So first in first, go to the raw data tab and convert this data set into the official table. Right? Select the data, use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+T, enable this option my table as header and click OK. Now we have converted this into the official table. Now let's give it a name to this table. Click on table design and in the table name let's give it a name as TBL data. Now we have data set ready. Now let's work on the mapping details. Click on mapping details tab and here in the mapping details we have the mapping detail for each of this column, right? We have a unique predefined list for the team. We have a unique predefined list for the employee name, for the cost center, for the shift and the task name. I can use this individual column in the formula to get this unique list, right? But what will happen in future if we get any new column, the new mapping column, then we have to update the formula, right? So whenever we'll get any new mapping column, then we have to edit the formula, then we have to update the reference for this new mapping column. So every time we have to do this one. And to avoid this, what we will do, we will keep this individual column side by side, right? So let's delete this empty column between these mapping columns. So delete this one, delete this column, delete this column and delete this column also. Now the individual mapping columns are there side by side. The next what we will do, we will convert this data into the official table. These are the individual mapping columns we know, but it looks like a tabular data, right? Now we will treat this data as a tabular data, like how we have a data set, right? So let's select this data and convert this into the official table. But you have to make sure that what is our last row of our mapping column, right? So we have a last row as a 391. So make sure you have to select all 390 rows for all of these columns, right? So Control A, it will select the continuous data. Now we have selected all 391 rows for each of this column. Now use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+T and enable this option my table as header and click OK. Now we have converted this into the official table, right? Let's give it a name to this table. Click on table design and give it a name as TBL map. So we have this individual mapping column all together in one table. So whenever we want to refer to any of the column, we have to refer to this table, right? So by this what will happen in future, if we add any new column, so that column will be part of this table, right? So by this you no need to update formula again and again, right? The next, the important item is the header name. In the mapping details, you have to use the exactly same header name what we have in our raw data set. In the data set, what is the name we have for the team? So it has just team, right? So you have to use the same header name in your mapping details also. So we have the employee name, this exactly same name we have in our data set. We have the cost center, we have the shift, we have the task name, and all these names exactly same in the mapping details also. So you have to make sure that whatever name you are using in the mapping details, it should be matched with our raw data set. Because the indirect function will use based on the headers, not based on the column reference. We will not use this E, F, G, H. We will use the header name. This is the very important to keep exactly same header what we have in the data set. Right? Now we have the mapping details ready. We have the data set ready. Next, go to our summary report format. First, we have to get the drop-down list, right? Which will have a list of headers. If you see our data set here, we have an employee name, we have a team, we have a task name, cost center, and shift. If you want to see attendance summary report by task name, then I have to filter the task name. If I want to see report by cost center, then I have to select the cost center. So I have to list down all the header names which I want to see in the report. So you can do in two ways. Go to the mapping details and add the header list. So here I can enter manually, right? I can enter if I want to see by team, or if I want to see by employee name, or if I want to see by cost center, if I want to see by shift, or if I want to see by task name. Those header names we can enter manually here. But there is a drawback. When you enter the header list manually as a static value, then what will happen in future, if you want to see by any other column, then you have to add that new column again here. Every time you have to update this. And to avoid this, what we will do, we'll read the header name from this mapping table. And if you see, these headers are there in a column wise, right? And we have to get the header list in the row wise. So for that, what we will do, we'll use the transpose, right? Let's enter the transpose function equal to transpose bracket open. Now select this header from this TBL map table, right? Close the bracket and press enter. So we have the header list in a row wise. In future, if I add any new header here, like a new column, then this header automatically will reflect in our list, right? So let's delete this column. Now what we will do, this list which we have extracted from the mapping table, this list will add to the data validation, right? Now go to our summary report format, select the B2 cell, delete the existing value, click on data menu and select data validation. From settings tab, select the list. Click on source reference text box. In here, we'll select that list which we have created, right? Go to the mapping details and select the first cell from the header list and enter the hash symbol to select the entire range, as we are using Office 365. Now click on OK. Then you can see in the drop down we have all the headers, right? If I want to see by task name, I can just select the task name, and whatever header I will select, that header name will reflect here, right? So we have added the drop down with the respective header names. Next, we have to get the attendance date here, right? So let's enter the 8th Feb. And so we will pass the date here. Then next we'll select this header name from this drop down. And whenever I will select this header, then I have to get the predefined unique list from the mapping details, not from the raw data set, right? So I have selected the header name as cost center, then I should get the predefined unique list of my cost center. If I go to my mapping details, you can see I have my cost center here, right? I have to get this unique list. Or if I select the header name as shift, then I have to get the unique predefined shift list from this mapping details. Now let's add the formula here to get the list here. Enter the equal to sign, go to the mapping details and select this shift column. Right, so we have selected this shift column from our mapping table. You can see how my reference is created. It has a table name which is a TBL map and the header name between the square brackets. So whenever we refer to any column in the table, we will have the table name, then we will have the square brackets, and between these square brackets we will have our header name, right? Now press enter. We will have the predefined list from our mapping table. If I want to see by task name, I can select the task from the drop down, then I should get the task name list, right? If you see the reference, This is a static reference we have entered here, right? Always it will refer to the shift column. This TBL map is the fixed value for all the columns in the mapping table. The only difference is the header name, and we have to make this part dynamic based on our selection. If I selected a task name, then I should get here task name, right? So we have to make this part dynamic. So for that, what we will do, we'll enter this TBL map, open a square bracket in double quotes, and here we'll refer to this B2 cell to make this dynamic, right? Enter the double quotes before T and enter the double quotes after this square bracket. Then put it ampersand, delete this column name and refer to this B2 cell. Select this B2, put it ampersand and enter this, close the square bracket in double quotes. Now press enter. Now we have just created a dynamic reference, right? So this is as a text. When we create a dynamic reference, then it will not act as a reference. It will be act as a text value. So whenever I will change any header from this drop down, then that header name will reflect in this reference, right? What all we have to do is we have to wrap this into the indirect formula, so that indirect formula indirectly refer to this reference, right? So let's edit this formula. After equal to sign, enter the indirect formula, open bracket and close the bracket in the last and press enter. You can see what happened here. So it referred to the cost center column in the mapping table, and whatever data we have in that column it's showing here, right? If I want to see by task, then I can just select the task from the drop down, then we will have a list of tasks from our mapping table. Just to make this fully dynamic, we have converted this mapping details into the official table so that we can refer to the header name very easily, and we can utilize the indirect function to retrieve the information dynamically from a specific column, right? Go back to our summary report format, and here you can see we have so many zeros here, right? Why these zeros is coming? If you see the mapping table here, so we have 391 rows only in the employee name column, and other column we have very limited values, right? It has just 8 cells, it has just 5 rows, it has just 4 rows, right? The number of rows are different by column. So all we have to do is we have to exclude these blanks, and to exclude these blanks, what we will do, we will wrap this indirect formula in filter, so that we can filter out only the non-blank value, right? Let's copy this indirect formula. So we have copied this indirect formula. Then next we'll enter the filter function here, equal to filter bracket open. The first parameter is array. Array means which column of information you need as an output, that columns you have to select in the array parameter. So in our case, we have just created the indirect formula, right, to get the unique list of the selected headers. So let's paste that indirect formula here, put it comma. The second parameter is include. So what we want to include here, you have to include only the non-blank cells, right? And to filter only non-blank cells, what we'll do, we'll use the ISBlank formula here in place of include. ISBlank has only one parameter, which is a value. So from which column we have to filter only non-blanks? So whatever indirect formula we have created, right, from that column, right? So let's paste the indirect formula which we have copied and close the bracket for ISBlank. So this ISBlank function returns if the cell is non-blank, it will return the false. If the cell is blank, it will return the true. So what we are looking for? We are looking for only false value. False value means non-blank cells. So let's enter the logic here, equal to false. Now close the bracket for filter and press enter. Now you can see, now we don't have any blank cells here, right? So we have filtered out all the blanks by using the filter function. If I select the header as cost center, then we will have the unique list of cost center from the mapping table. If I want to see by team, then I can select the team from the drop down. Then we will have the unique list of team from the mapping table, right? Now what we have to get here? So we have to get the total count from the raw data set, right? So we have to get the total count for this task and for this attendance date, right? And to get this, what we can do, we can use the Quantifiers formula here, right? So let's enter the Quantifiers formula equal to Quantifiers, open bracket. The use of Quantifiers formula to get the count based on multiple conditions, right? So in our case, we have to get the total count based on task and based on this attendance rate, right? The first parameter is criteria range 1. For which task? So we have to get the count of this task, right? But from which column? From the task name column from the raw data set, right? Go to the raw data set and select the task name column here, right? So we have selected the task name, put it comma, the second parameter is criteria 1. So which task you want to get the count, right? So in our case, go back to the summary report, we have to get the count for this task name, right? You have to get the count for this task name. Select this first cell and enter the hash symbol to select the entire range. Put it comma here. The third parameter is criteria range 2. So we have to get the count for this attendance date also, right? From which column? From the attendance date column from the raw data set. Go to the data set and select the attendance date column from here. So we have selected the attendance date column, put it comma, for which date you want to get the count. Go back to our summary report format sheet and select this C2 cell where we have entered our attendance date, right? Lock this cell, so when we drag this formula down, the location of this attendance date should not change. Now we have added all the references to get the total count for this task and for this attendance date. Close the bracket for contif and press enter. So we have got the total count for each of this task for this attendance date. If I want to see the total count for the shift, I can select the shift from the drop down. Then we will have the unique list of shift, but the total count is missing here, right? Why is missing? Why we are getting 0 here? If you see the cell reference here, we are referring to task name, and this is the static reference we have selected here. Whatever header will select from the drop down, it will always refer to this task name only, as we have selected the column statically. So all we have to do is we have to make this part dynamic. How we will make dynamic? By using the indirect function, right? And what is the header name? So the header name selected as shift here, right? So do we have a same header name in the raw data set? Yes, we have the same name, right? This is our important thing in our dynamic report automation. We should have all the header names exactly same everywhere. So we have the shift name. So what we will do, go back to our summary sheet, edit this contif formula, and we'll make this part dynamic, so that whatever header will select, indirect function will refer to that column from the specific table. So in our case, the table name is TBL data, right? So let's copy this table name and delete this criteria range 1 reference, and we'll enter the indirect formula here, equal to indirect bracket open the reference text. How the reference will create whenever we refer to the column in a table? So it will have the table name, we have the open square bracket, then we have the header name, then next we will have the close square bracket, right? So in double quote, we will enter the table name, which is a table TBL data, open square bracket, put it double quotes here, put it ampersand, and refer to this B2 cell where we will have our header name, right? So what indirect function will do, it will refer to this column in this table, which is the TBL data, which is our raw data set. Put it ampersand and enter the close square bracket in double quotes. Now close the bracket for indirect. So what we have done is we have made this criteria range 1 dynamic, so that whatever header name will select, indirect function will refer to that column in the TBL data official table. So by this it will be fully dynamic, right? So for the criteria range 1 we have made this dynamic. If you see the criteria range 2, here we have the attendance date, right? And we are referring to attendance date column in the raw data set. If you want to make this dynamic, you can make this reference also dynamic. But in our data set, we have the attendance date column, right? And this column will never change. Always we will have the header name attendance date. But still, if you want to make this dynamic, you can make this dynamic by using the indirect formula, something like this, or else you can just keep as is, as a static reference, as it will never change, right? Now press enter. Now we will have the total count for this shift column for this attendance date. If I want to see the total count for the cost center, I can select the cost center from drop down. Then we will have the unique list of cost center and the respective total count for this selected attendance date. This is really nice, right? So we have made this fully dynamic. Next we have to get the count for each of this attendance status, right? So here we can use the Quantifiers formula again to get the count for each of this attendance status for this cost center for this attendance date. So we have a 3 criteria here: the attendance date and the selected header column and this attendance status column. So this attendance status, we have a column in our raw data set. So from where we can get the attendance status count, right? Let's go back to our summary report format. Let's use the Quantifiers formula to get the attendance status count for the selected header and for this attendance date. So equal to quantif s, open the bracket, the criteria range 1, right? So we have to get the count for this cost center, the selected headers. So again what we will do, we'll select the cost center column from the data set. Then later we'll make this dynamic, right? So let's go to the data set and select the cost center column. So we have selected the cost center column, put it comma. For which cost center we have to get the count? Go back to summary report sheet. We have to get the count for this cost center, right? So let's select this first cell and enter the hash symbol to select the entire range. Just make sure to remove this sheet name. So put it comma here. The third parameter is criteria range 2. So we have to get the count for this attendance date, right? So let's go to the data set and select the attendance date column. So we have selected the attendance date. Put it comma here. For which date we have to get it? Go back to summary report and select this C2 cell. For this attendance date we have to get the count. Lock this cell so the location of the cell never change. Put it comma here. The fifth parameter is criteria range 3. So we have added the cost center, we have added the attendance date. Next we have to get the attendance status, right? So let's select the attendance status column from the raw data set. This is the H column, right? So we have selected the attendance status column, put it comma, go back to summary sheet. For which attendance status we have to get the count? For this, right? So let's select this one. Make sure to remove this sheet name for the active sheet. And in the last, enter the hash symbol to select the entire range, as we are using Office 365. Now we have added reference for the cost center, we added reference for the attendance date, we added reference for the attendance status. Now close the bracket for quantif s and press enter. Now you can see, now we got the attendance count for each of this attendance status for this cost center for this attendance date. If I want to see the count for task wise, I can select the task name from the drop down. Then we will have a list of task name and the total count for each of this task. But the status wise count So we are getting a zeros for this each of this attendance status. And if you see the cell reference here, we have a static reference which is referring to the cost center, right? So we have to make this part dynamic to refer to the header, whatever header we have selected from the drop down, right? So let's make this part dynamic. Let's delete this criteria range 1, then we'll use the indirect formula here, right? So what is my header, what is my table name here? So the TBL data is my table name, right? Open a square bracket, put it double quotes, put it ampersand, and select this B2 cell. So where we have our header name. So what indirect function will do, it will refer to this header on this TBL data official table. Put it ampersand and enter the close square bracket in double quotes. Now close the bracket for indirect formula. Now we have made this criteria range 1 dynamic. If you want to make these attendance date column also dynamic, you can make it by using the indirect formula. But this attendance date column will never change, so we'll keep this as a static. And also if you see the criteria range 3, we have a static reference which is referring to the attendance status column in TBL data table. We know this column also will never change, it will have always this attendance status column. But still if you want to keep this a dynamic, you can enter the indirect formula here also. But we'll keep this static as these two references will never change. It will always be attendance date and this always be a attendance status column, right? Press the enter, then we will have the count for each of this attendance status for this task and for this attendance date. Now if I change the header to the cost center, then we will have the total count and we will have the attendance count for each of this attendance status for this attendance date for this selected headers. You can imagine how much indirect formula is powerful, which helps making anything dynamic in Excel. Especially when you combine indirect formula with official table, it will be more powerful. And so whenever you want to automate any report dynamically, then you can use this, then you can combine indirect formula with official table. Without any much effort, you can make fully dynamic reports in Excel by using this indirect formula combined with official table. Now let's make all this contain into the center. Then next you can apply conditional formatting to hide these 0 values from your report. And to do that, click on Home menu and select Conditional Formatting and click on Manage Rule. And from this Manage Rule, click on New Rule and select this last option, Use a Formula to Determine. And in the formula text box, enter the equal to sign, and this is the starting cell of my report, right? So let's select this C5 and make sure to remove this dollar symbol, as when this conditional formatting apply to rest of the cells, it should change from C5 to C6 or a C5 to D5. So that's why we have to remove the dollar symbol. If C5 is equal to 0, then what type of formatting you want to apply? Click on this formats and click on this font tab. From here, choose the light whitish color here and click OK. Next, click OK. In the applies to reference text box, select the cells where you want to apply this conditional formatting. So I want to apply starting from C5 to P5 and up to, I will select thousands of rows. So I will select some thousands of rows here, right? Now click on apply, then click OK. Now you can see wherever we will have a zeros, it will get hides. So this one is missing, right? And this one is also missing. So let's check what happened in the conditional formatting. Go back to the conditional formatting, go to the manage rule, and here you can see the cell reference showing as a C4 instead of C5. So let's change this to C5, click OK, and click apply and click OK. Now we will have the numbers visible properly on our report, right? If I want to see report for the 7th Feb, then I can just change the attendance date, and we will have the attendance status summary report for this 7th Feb. And this is fully dynamic, right? I selected the task name, then I can see by task name. If I want to see by team, I can select the team, then we will have the team wise attendance summary report. In future, if you want to add any other column to this drop down list, then all you have to do is go to the raw data sheet, by which column you want to see the report. Let's take in this example, I want to see the report by employee type, right? So all I have to do is I have to copy this header name, go to the mapping details tab and add this column to our mapping table, right? So we added this employee type column. Now let's add the unique list for this employee type. So we have only two types of value here. One is the regular and second one is the contract, right? So we added employee type column, and this header name is exactly same what we have in our raw data set. As soon as I added this new column to our mapping table, you can see in the header list that employee type column is reflecting, right? And the same list we have added to the drop down in our summary report. Go back to summary report, and from this drop down select the employee type, then you can see the report by the employee type. You no need to do any complex thing here. We have using just an indirect formula to make this fully dynamic, right? So if you want to see by any other column, all you have to do is you have to add that header name to this mapping table, and the header name should match with your raw data set. And next you just have to select that header name from the drop down, then you will have the report by that header name. This is really cool, right? Here we are not using any helper column. Here we are not using any complex formula, no complex logic. Just simple indirect formula, and everything is depends on the header name with the official table. This is really cool feature, right? So you can use this indirect formula and combine with official table to prepare any fully dynamic reports in Excel. I hope this video gives you very good understanding how we can leverage this indirect formula combined with official table to create this type of fully dynamic reports in Excel. If you like the content, please do like this video, and please make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss any of the videos. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching.